Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. I am joined today off screen by Kenza for an occasional source of sniffles and other tiny sounds, but not joining us on screen today, maybe later in the week. Anyway though, so today I wanted to talk about Lola Montez, and this is why just myself, we'll maybe talk about group stuff later. But anyway though, yes, Lola Montez, a historical character, kind of interesting because as the internet allows more and more people to have a voice and become prominent characters in society, you find that more and more people are fundamentally insane, but persuasive. Persuasively insane. So you get this in a lot of different groups. I mean, you just see people who get in the public eye, and they do something completely cataclysmically destructive, and they bring down whole groups with them. A good example would be Mando Pony. And Mando Pony, for those of you who are not familiar, he was a guy, and not to really knock on him, I know that some people really just kind of really hard on him, but I felt a little bit sorry for the guy. And this is actually something we're going to get into, which is why this is so dangerous. Is Mando Pony, from everything that I could tell, seemed like a nice guy, but maybe just didn't realize what he was doing until well after he was in the thick of it, and everything was completely screwed up. But Mando Pony was a guy, he was a musician, and I believe that he was hanging out with the Creeper family, and the Creeper family, they're entertainers by trade, and so he was fundamentally networking. But someone on 4chan made a joke that Mando Pony was a pedophile, because he was hanging around Michelle Creeper, who was a young girl. And Mando Pony reacted very... well, destructively. He got upset. He goes, who is this? You know, this whole 4chan website is nothing but degenerate subhuman scum. I won't handle this. And so he went and he was in contact with show staff from My Little Pony. So he went to contact them, and he was like, everybody, the My Little Pony board on 4chan is just the most evil, terrible place. It's just everyone is wrong. And so then show staff got up, and they were like, yeah, this My Little Pony place is wrong and evil, and they shouldn't be talking bad about Mando Pony. He's a nice guy. Like I say, everything that I read about him, everybody was like, yeah, he's kind of a nice guy. I mean, so yes, basically, because he overreacted so much, he started this great big sort of landslide of drama, where once show staff started harping on fans of the show really got mad at Mando Pony, and then they started to come after him, and it just snowballed, as then it got to be more people were actually attacking Mando Pony intentionally, and Mando Pony was trying to get support and trying to get people to explain that he wasn't a bad guy, and the more that people came to his defense, you got this thing where it was like, he called in support, so when he got a group of people to come and speak for him, to speak against a group of people who were speaking against him, you basically had, it was like social armies. They were fighting against one another. So it just got bigger and bigger, and that was kind of the whole thing. And eventually he seems to have figured it out, and these days he's kind of laying low. As I think it occurred to him that the best thing to do at that point was just to stop and then just kind of vanish a little bit, and everyone kind of quit talking about him. But we've also seen this with other groups too. Mando Pony was one of the ones that affected the My Little Pony fandom, which of course I've been a part of for since the mod purges on Ko and all that. But you're seeing this in other places too. Again, with the Gamergate controversy, we've seen some similar things where certain people have gotten very much in the limelight, despite not necessarily being totally hinged or grounded. But just we've seen a lot of people say very stupid things, very racist things, very sexist things, and getting a lot of defense, really on both sides of Gamergate. There's a lot of narcissism on the internet, really, in general. I mean, and not to say, and this coming from someone who kind of makes a living by getting up and expressing an opinion on things, but some people, they kind of, I don't know, I think the internet fame has a way of going to a lot of people's head, where they get up there and they kind of see like, oh man, I've got like 4,000 people who agree with me on this subject, and then they sort of get they get ahead of themselves and don't realize it's really easy when you can speak to thousands of people. It's really easy to find like 4,000 people who agree with you, because the world is a very big place, and you can find at least 4,000 people who agree with just about any crazy view that you've got. So it's important not to get a really big head about that sort of thing. So Lola Montez. I'm going to talk about Lola Montez because history repeats itself, and well before the age of the internet, before the age of Tumblr, before you could contact your favorite show staff or whatever and get them to shout at their own fandom, we had Lola Montez back in, I believe, the late 1800s, unless I'm remembering incorrectly. I'm very good with dates. But anyway though, Lola Montez is a very interesting character because if you look at the history, she was a very prominent public figure A lot of people knew who she was at the time. She traveled to Paris and Bavaria and the United States, and she got involved with a lot of different groups. She was from England originally. But it's very difficult to tell how much information about Lola is actually true, because so many people hated Lola, and yet so many people loved Lola. And Lola herself lied a great deal of the time, and it was hard to tell whether or not she was intentionally lying, or if she really just honestly believed some of the things that she told people. But Lola, when she started off, she was, as a young girl, she moved to England, and there was some conflict. I believe that baptismal records show that she was born in a different place than she told people that she was born, but it's really kind of trivial where she was actually born at. It was something like they thought maybe Lola just believed that maybe Lola was confused. Or maybe she thought that one place was different from another, but or was better than another. But Lola was born in England, is the bottom line. And from a very young age, there are a number of stories about how Lola was just kind of an impossible child to take care of. Like, apparently she used to do things like she would strip down naked and go run through the streets just to get a rile out of people. Or so the rumors say. Whether or not this is a substantial thing is difficult to really determine, because everywhere that Lola went, people hated her, and people said nasty things about her. But people also defended her, and so you never know. So anyway, though, after her life as a young child running naked through the streets, she apparently decided to take those skills and turn them towards dancing. She became a dancing girl. And she moved to Paris, and she claimed that she was a Spanish dancing girl. She wasn't English. And this was actually kind of common. A lot of famous dancers did this sort of thing, as they would claim to be from somewhere exotic, and that would draw people in. Mata Hari was the same way. Mata Hari, I believe, said that she was from the Middle East, and that was full of crap. She was from, like, somewhere in Europe. She was not Middle Eastern at all. It was very common. It's a very common thing for people to do. But her work didn't get really very good reviews. As far as actual skill and talent went, Lola Montez was not really that great. Also, Lola Montez wasn't her real name. Her real name was like Amelia or something like that, or Maria. I can't remember what it was. Maria, like Lola. Lola was the name that she went by for most of her life, though. It was her stage name, and it was the personality that she adopted. At the age of 19, she got married, but the marriage fell through right away. And this is actually going to be really interesting, because as you follow Lola's life, she left just a trail of male bodies in her wake, because they were just like men who would fall in love with her, and they would come to her defense, and their reputations would be destroyed, and then she would move right along. So Lola got married at 19, and then her career started to fall apart, and things were going really poorly. And she was married in England, but she was working in France. And so when her career started to fall apart, because everything got critically panned, and she really wasn't doing that well, she started dating an influential critic, an influential drama critic. And I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, so he will just be Critic. He'll be the critic. If you like, imagine that little bald guy from the show The Critic, Jay, who's got the big nose and everything like that. He was that guy, but much more popular. And anyways, so Jay, we'll call him Jay. Jay the critic, he fell in love with Lola. She actually became introduced to Jay through a friend, I believe. She was a decent horse rider, and so what she did is, I think she met a friend. As the story goes, she was riding her horse and then fell off of her horse in front of the friend of Jay, and so Jay was introduced to Lola through his friend, something like this. Or perhaps that's how she met the King of Bavaria. Most of her stories about how she met influential people, there's legends. They're just kind of like legendary in a way. A little bit like myth, but if like myth were really stupid. So anyway, though, so whatever the way, she through networks, I mean, she was a dancer. She met people, she networked, and she made friends with friends, and she came to meet Jay, who was a burgeoning critic at the time. At the time, he was rather influential, he was growing in popularity, and so Lola started dating him, or sleeping with him, really. I mean, their relationship was rather tumultuous. They were fighting a lot. They got along splendidly for a little while, and after that, things started to get bumpy. What Lola started to request is she wanted a lot of positive reviews for her dancing. You know, again, as I talk about Gamergate, some of you might recognize some parallels here. But anyway, so Lola wanted a lot of positive reviews for her dancing, and Jay agreed, okay, I'll give you these reviews. And the trouble is that as he did this, Lola became kind of a more controversial figure, because the art world is very unusual in the fact that everything is rather subjective. So when you have someone really influential saying like, no, the rest of you just don't understand. When this man poops on a canvas, what he's really saying deep down is he's got this message. And so he started doing this kind of thing for Lola. Is this burgeoning critic. He started going around and he was going like, yeah, Lola. I mean, like, when you look at Lola, at first, you're seeing this, but when you look past the act, then you see what it really represents, it's like interpretive dance. And so he started to inflate her whole thing. But the trouble was that a lot of other critics weren't buying it, and so the public, this helped boost Lola up, and more people started to go and see her shows, and it helped her get notoriety in Paris. But a lot of other critics kind of weren't buying it, because the critics were, of course, critical of each other. Jay wasn't that influential of a critic. There were other critics that had more clout than he did, and of course the more influential critics just didn't buy into this crap, and when they found out, you're just dating Lola, they really kind of got a little bit flippant. They didn't take very well to Jay's criticisms. So Jay had to continue to work as a critic, though, as he was dating Lola, and the conflict actually grew between Jay and Lola as they were going along. The trouble is that Jay's professional friends didn't like Lola very much at all, but Lola wanted to meet all of Jay's professional friends because they were her doorway into more success and more influence. So eventually, a big splitting point for the two of them was when Jay had to go to there was this really upper class party that he was going to, where a lot of very wealthy Parisians, a lot of wealthy Frenchmen were all going to be in attendance, and they were major critics of like the art and theater and things like that. And so Jay was going to go and he was going to network, and Lola wanted to go too, and Jay told her no, because at that point there was already enough conflict in his life that he was starting to recognize a pattern that Lola kind of rubbed people the wrong way. She had a very aggressive personality. She wasn't very introspective. She was kind of just focused on her own needs, on her own wants. She knew what she needed to get ahead, and she pursued it, and it upset people sometimes. So Jay told her no. Like, these are way too important. This is about my career. It's not about your career. It's about my career. I've got to go and I've got to work this networking opportunities, and look, you've got to just relax. It's for me. It's for both of us. Like, if I get more influence, then you get more influence. Just let me do it. But Lola wouldn't have it. She wanted to go to the dance. She didn't think it was fair that he was going to go without her, and so they got in a great big fight. So sure enough, he shows up at the party in a really foul mood, and he starts drinking. So Jay gets drunk, and he gets in a fight with another highly influential critic. They don't know what the fight was over specifically. Some think that maybe the critic insulted Lola, which made Jay angry, but there's no substantive proof that that's the case. But whatever the case, Jay got in a fight with another critic. The fight devolved into a duel, and so they got guns out, and then Jay was shot dead. Boom. That was it, and that was kind of the end of Lola's career in Paris. After that, there wasn't a lot of people who wanted to speak up on behalf of Paris, because fighting over Lola presumably got Jay killed. So Lola then had to figure out what she was going to do with her life next. So she turned to becoming a courtier. As a lot of people came to Paris, a lot of famous statesmen and kings and wealthy folk were still around Paris, and because of Jay, Lola still had her connections. So she moved along, and she discovered the King of Bavaria was rather single. And so this is, like I say, there's another wacky love story about how exactly she introduced herself to the King of Bavaria. But there are multiple stories about how this happened. This is why I say I get confused over how she met which people, because there's more than one story to each guy that she met. But either the horse riding thing is how she met the King of Bavaria, in which case, if that was the case, then what happened then, according to legend, which is probably false, is when she went to go meet the king through this friend of hers, the king said, no, I'm busy. I don't really want to meet Lola right now. I don't even know who this girl is. And so what she did is she stormed into his office anyway, and when the guards tried to stop her, somehow, miraculously, her shirt was torn open, exposing her bare chest, much to the shock of the king, who then took pity on her and allowed her to wait in his office until she got new clothing, and that was how she met the King of Bavaria. Another story, as it goes, is that Lola met the King of Bavaria at a party, and the King of Bavaria supposedly asked Lola if her breasts were real, at which point she removed her blouse to demonstrate that, yes, they were quite real. In fact, if you'd like to touch them, then they're quite real. Many historians think that these stories are just patently false, because, as I say, Lola had a really poor reputation. She also had a really good reputation. It depends on who you asked. So, like I say, many think that Lola was probably just introduced herself at a party. Most likely, if you follow logical reasoning. I mean, the King of Bavaria was a king, and he was a popular king. He probably wasn't an idiot. It's doubtful that he approached Lola in such a brazen manner, and if you imagine a woman bursting into your office with her breast exposed, with her going, "No, I have to meet the king," then most rational people would have kicked her out of the place. So probably neither of those stories are true. But those are the stories that the people told about Lola for ages. So anyway, Lola, however she met the King of Bavaria, he eventually fell in love with her. And in kind of the same way as what happened with Jay, after she had kind of put the King of Bavaria under her spell, she proceeded to seek favors and ask for influence and so on and so forth. And the King of Bavaria gradually granted each of her requests. Now, the trouble with Lola was that she wasn't really a very good politician, if you didn't follow from any of the previous stuff. She was very aggressive, like I say, very self-centered, and she had her ideals, and she was, among other things, she was incredibly liberal on the political spectrum. But the trouble was that because she wasn't a very good politician, she had the tendency to just pursue her agendas and leave everyone else in the cold. This had a highly polarizing effect on her support in Bavaria, and she got to be so influential that, against the recommendations of the King of Bavaria's advisors, he elevated her to a countess because he loved her very much. He trusted her decisions. She had a lot of passion. She was very convicted. She believed in herself. But like I say, like a number of personalities on Tumblr and what have you these days, also she was not really all that well informed. She was just really persuasive and really insane. So he made her a countess, though. He thought this was a really good idea, and this had somewhat of a like I say, there was split opinions on how this should go. Lola had supporters because of her extreme liberal politics. She served as a wonderful tool for those people who were on the left who wanted to see their stuff come to life, because Lola surely would support any kind of stupid liberal agenda that they could come up with, and she would not compromise, and she had a lot of influence over the King of Bavaria. So she was very popular with the left, especially the far left, who could get Lola to go along with a lot of stupid decisions. Once Lola believed in something, she really didn't think about what she believed in, and so she would just go and she would convince the king to act on these stupid things that she thought. And one thing that she especially did that upset a lot of people, she was very hard on the conservatives. She disliked the Jesuits a great deal. She was incredibly critical of the Jesuits, and as you do, politics weren't that different back in those days. I mean, if you look at the broad spectrum, the young folk rather liked Lola, the older folk rather did not. And the biggest problem was not that she had liberal opinions. It was really just the uncompromising, polarizing, aggressive nature in which she did things. In fact, this personality trait of hers, it led to more rumors while she was the Countess. Apparently being Countess made her just very bold. It all went to her head. She got to think that she was a lot more important than the people around her, according to rumors. Again, not substantiated, but supposedly she used to do things like, for example, she was riding once and got behind an older gentleman who, as we all know, when you get older, you become more and more afraid of speed, and this particular gentleman must have been very decrepit because he was riding a horse at well below walking speed, and so Lola got mad, and she wasn't able to pass him because the streets were crowded, so she took her riding crop and she hit the man in the back with it until he pulled aside and let Lola pass. So the rumors go. There is another legend, similarly, where Lola was walking her dog, and apparently her dog got off the leash and attacked a man, and instead of trying to pull the dogs away from the man, she got upset at the man for provoking her dogs, and she helped the dogs. She attacked the man to help her dogs. So legends like this was the kind of thing that Lola got to be famous for around Bavaria. As I say, mostly rumors. There's really not any, I mean, like, there wasn't film in that day. Nobody had camera phones to prove that, oh yeah, this is what Lola used to do. But so many things arose about Lola. So many different rumors arose. It got to be to where the rumors themselves kind of created a sort of truth. The idea was really just that Lola had a terrible reputation, and everybody started to kind of believe these things, because she'd been a dancing girl. She was known for this sort of risque sort of thing. She'd been a stage actor in the past. She was never really completely direct about things. Her views were a little bit weird. But like I say, she had support, and she had enemies. But what eventually got really weird is that Lola had support from the university system. I mean, you know, like I say, politics not that different from today. The universities were interesting because there were a lot of young people, a lot of intellectuals, high-minded intellectuals, and some of them were very happy with Lola's very liberal politics. They thought, yes, you know, Lola understands that we need to move forward, progress, be progressive. And so they supported Lola. But there were also conservatives in the university. And worse still, if you looked at the higher-ranking intellectuals, the people who had a lot of clout and a lot of influence, they were critical of Lola. Even people on the far left in the university would be critical of Lola in the way that universities are often prone to doing. They would review things that Lola said, and they would look at like philosophies that Lola followed, and they would critique Lola's politics. And the conservatives there were absolutely relentless on her. They would critique her harder than anybody. And Lola hated this. So what Lola did is she asked the King of Bavaria to shut down the university. And sadly, he did. He chose to do this. After that, she lost a lot of support from the university system because there was no longer a freaking university system in Bavaria. The king shut it down because Lola asked him to do that. So students were chanting in the street, "Death to Lola, death to Lola." This was one of these just very stupid things. This is something that they actually have on record. That was just kind of proved that she was so narcissistic that she wasn't able to see that she had supporters within the university system. She just saw the criticisms, and she didn't like them, so she asked the university to be closed, and when it did, suddenly she had enemies. Instead of having split support, she had nothing but foes. And in her mind, though, you know, this was a good idea. She already assumed there was nothing but enemies in the university system because she paid attention to the criticisms and wasn't really paying much attention to anything else. So, Bavaria's politics got to be really unstable throughout the course of Lola's involvement with the King of Bavaria. And again, historians disagree, but some people think that perhaps Lola is one of the major motivating factors behind the civil war that eventually forced the King of Bavaria to abdicate. It got so bad that the King of Bavaria actually had to ask Lola to leave the country while they tried to sort out the mess of politics that had sprung up, because so many unpopular things had been done. And like I say, there were people who supported the far left extremism, but the trouble with polarizing your country like this, where you just start pursuing like one agenda and you ignore the needs of like everyone else, is that pretty soon the people who you ignore just get to be very frustrated. They become completely disenfranchised. They don't want to deal with you anymore. And the people on the left are happy for a little while until they realize that you're just brainlessly enforcing whatever the extreme mouths are calling for. And I mean, like, if anyone's been involved in any kind of situation, I mean, like, imagine any kind of forum or video game or whatever, where somebody says something like, oh, nerf tanks, you know, nerf tanks overpowered. And then the game developers come in and they just nerf tanks into the dirt. Then everyone's pissed because they're like, no, you know, those people were too extreme. You shouldn't have taken their advice. Just a little nerf, like, make them move slower. Don't make them worthless. That kind of thing. That was kind of how it was, is when you follow extreme, polarizing politics, you get politics that are just crap. And so the moderates got to be against, the moderates got screwed. The only people who were happy were the extreme ends of the politics. And then even the extreme people, they were extreme because they didn't realize what they were asking for in the first place. And when their own politics bit them in the ass, it kind of, you know, it unraveled a little bit. So, yes, the political situation in Bavaria kind of began to unravel. And the King of Bavaria had to send Lola away. Didn't matter how sexy her booty was anymore, she had to leave. So, the King of Bavaria stepped down, and Lola hung around for a while, hoping that he would come to join her. Of course, he never did. That was kind of the end of her relationship with the King of Bavaria. His whole nation was in tatters, and his career as king was over. And so this was like 2 for 2 of influential men, highly influential men, whose lives had been ruined, thanks to Lola. So, She then met an officer in England, and they fell in love, and he was incredibly wealthy, he was very influential, and so Lola pursued this officer in England, and this was a whirlwind romance. It didn't last for very long, but he fell in love with her, and she then married him. What she neglected to inform him was that she was already married when she was 19. So in England, this was illegal. You would get charged with bigamy for this. So the authorities came to go and have a talk with Lola and her husband, her new husband, and they said, so what are you guys trying to pull here? So they had to get up and they moved to Spain, I believe is where it was, and then they began fighting. As after that, it was like the husband lost a lot of influence, he really wasn't doing anything for Lola, Lola started a fight with him, and they split up. So when her husband, now they got a divorce, when her husband went back to England, he found that he'd been stripped of his position, and that was it. His military career was over, and then he died in a boating accident, which wasn't Lola's fault, but his life was kind of like, that was the end of it. His life kind of wound up in tatters. Then she moved along, I believe, to Australia or America. I can't remember where she went next. I might be remembering incorrectly. Maybe she didn't even go to Australia. But I know that after that, she kind of continued to entertain the same tactics as she tried to get influential people to fall in love with her, and it worked, but she couldn't maintain the relations long enough to get anything out of them. So she would go to like Australia and she would date for a while, and then her shows would just be critically panned. People really weren't very impressed. Like I say, I recall Australia, and if I'm speaking correctly, maybe it was just in America that she did this, but people were saying that Lola was fundamentally a stripper. She wasn't really a skilled dancer. What she would do is they said that she would just go and she would lift up her skirt high enough to see that she was wearing nothing underneath. They said she had no undergarments on. And this again, vicious rumors. She danced with undergarments. She did wear clothes, but she relied a lot on sex to sell her act, which is one of the reasons why she got such poor reviews, is because the critics came and they were like, any woman could do this. Like, any woman could take her clothes off on stage and show off her breasts or whatever. Like, this is not skilled dancing. This is just dancing. She's trying to draw in like young male audiences. We're really unimpressed with all this. And as I say, her career sort of sputtered and didn't really go anywhere. She wound up just spinning her wheels. And she dated a few men, some of which committed suicide after they dated her for a while. They started drinking a lot. But it was because every time Lola hooked up with a guy, she sucked them into her life politics. And Lola just had this history, as I believe, what I suspect, and what I've read that some other historians suspected about Lola, was that she might have had sort of a mild bipolar disorder. And so maybe it was that in her happy times, she was a very enthusiastic, happy individual, and she made other people happy, and she was perfectly fine. Maybe a little bit self-centered, but still a happy individual, still fun to be around. But in her low times, she maybe got vicious, and she started looking to like other people and saying like, you're the reason I'm sad right now, you're the reason I'm unhappy, and she would lash out. And so this is what I think, is that it wasn't really that she was intentionally manipulative, because she showed no signs of being a really good politician. It didn't seem like she ever had plans, or like she was ever doing anything intentionally. It just seemed like she would suck men in with a happy personality. Like, she was great, she was flirtatious, she knew how to talk to men, she was comfortable, she was really sure of herself, to put things nicely. And then when things went sour for her, she started to attack people. And her lovers, not understanding where all this bile was coming from, thought that it was also being caused by the outside world. It's like, Lola's normally so happy, what's going on? And so they would step in and they would try to help Lola out, and they'd get sucked into her politics, and it would turn out that it was all crap that Lola had done to herself. It was situations like with the university, where she had supporters in the university, but because she shut the university down, then she had no supporters, so she would go from having like some support to no support. And once these guys would get involved in politics like that, where they would come to the defense of this kind of behavior, they then became targets. And so their careers and their lives would get ruined by trying to defend Lola and trying to make Lola happy. So this is what I think, is I think that she just kind of had a mild bipolar disorder, and she just kind of rode the ups and downs, and whenever she got people involved in her life, she brought them up with them, and then she brought them down with her as well. So she had an uplifting effect for a little while and then crashed people. And this was the way that most of her life went. until about her early 40s, and by that time she was having a hard time attracting guys on any basis. She was too old to be screwing around with young, influential men anymore. So she became a nun. She joined a convent and she started doing charity work. So her life ends on somewhat of a positive note. It ended shortly thereafter, though, because she had syphilis. She was suffering from like the late stages of syphilis. She slept around a lot, and so she got syphilis. I believe she also had some other diseases, but it just caused her health to kind of fail. And so she did charity work for the rest of her life after she entered her 40s, and then she died. So Lola, historically speaking, she's not exactly villainized, and she's not exactly... I mean, it depends on your perspective. Like, I know that there are people out there who would hear, like, the kind of politics that Lola would support, and they would hear about her just brazen attitude, and they would applaud for that girl. Whereas there are other people who would hear about the kind of stuff that Lola did, and they would give a very diminishing, negative review on Lola's behavior. I've read multiple perspectives on it. There's a book I have called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Robert Greene? Yes, Robert Greene, that I really like, that talks about, he's got just a brief chapter on Lola and her behavior. And yeah, he actually gives a rather somewhat demeaning view of Lola. He's got a very negative opinion of her. But I've read positive opinions on Lola as well. And again, it kind of comes down to, you see somewhat the political leanings of the historians who look at her, because they read about the stuff that she did, and some people think that she was very progressive, she was a very forward thinker, she was very bold, she was very aggressive, and they say to themselves, it was just that aggression, it made people nervous, and and other people say, like, that aggression had no place in politics. Some people say that was the big problem, is that she was aggressive. And then of course you probably have people who are like, a woman like that was just undermining society. So there are different perspectives on what Lola was doing, and there's a lot of different perspectives at the time. You find that just she had followings, she was popular, and a lot of people could look at her charity work at the end of her life and say, like, that just goes to show that Lola turned over a new leaf, and whatever harm she'd done to the world, she'd also done good. I mean, she'd done some good, she'd done a lot of harm, she'd kind of left a lot of suffering in her wake. Just a very interesting life, and if you look at it, she really wasn't that... Like I say, to me, it sounds like she wasn't a very manipulative person. It didn't sound like she was really all that much of a... Like, she wasn't the devil, she wasn't a succubus. It just sounds like she had issues, and she sucked other people into her issues, and such was Lola's life. But she was very charming. She was very charming to a lot of people. Just also very insensitive to people who didn't share her views. So, yeah, historically speaking, I mean, it's something kind of interesting, as I feel like really the internet has just allowed a lot more. I mean, like, have always been people like Lola Montez throughout history. People who've been very influential, who have gotten through romance or other means, just networking, who get involved in places where maybe they shouldn't be, but because of their personality, they just kind of get in there. And then because they have a lot of emotional issues, they become extremely unpopular. And Lola Montez, like I said, is one of the more famous examples because of the way that she kind of toppled an entire country. But we see examples of this today. We see a lot of people on the internet, in a lot of different areas of politics, who seem to get popular just based on their force of personality. Like, you read them, you listen to the stuff they say, and they're highly motivated, they believe in what they say, they're bold, they're active, they're talking all the time about this and that, and they pay a lot of attention to their own politics, but they're very kind of self-centered, and they're really not paying attention to anyone on the other side. And they don't hear, I mean, like, everyone has biases, and that's fine. I mean, like, you can't be right about everything, and, like, depending on where you live. Like, for example, if you live in a state that relies a lot on coal for jobs, then whether or not you believe in environmental protection, you might be inclined to want to kind of protect the coal industry, because, your whole livelihood probably depends somewhat on the coal industry, or at least the livelihood of everyone around you. That doesn't necessarily make you good or evil. It's just that, this is what you need in your community to get by, and that's how it is. But someone from outside your community might have a much stronger stance against the coal industry, and so this is where we get the need for discussion and compromise, and people need to come together and say, like, okay, why do you believe this? It's not really it's not really like there's no split between good and evil. And so, like I say, you get a lot of these personalities like Lola Montez who are just very aggressive, who don't really do compromise. They don't really understand the other side. They just kind of have their own narcissistic views on life, and they just want things to be the way that they want things, and they don't care what anyone else thinks. They don't want to hear from anybody else. Everybody else is just a charlatan. They're liars. They're the devil. They're intentionally making the world worse. They have they're sinners. They're privileged. They're this or they're that. Very, very polar, very, very destructive. If they really got enough power to have a lot of influence, they would just cleave the country in half and then cause a civil war, because apparently, according to history, that's what those kind of politics do. And of course, these kind of politics, it's not just liberal. You get this conservative, liberal, one way or the other. If you get so extreme that you basically alienate, half of your country, then you're really just asking for trouble. So, yeah, I mean, because you get this all the time. I believe that there's clearly a lot of right-wing pundits as well who get so extreme and dismissive of the other side that if they ever got power, if they ever got real power, that they would just destroy the country. Same with people, like I say, just extremism is never healthy. But Lola Montez, history lesson, gossiping about dead people, always fun. Kenza was talking to me today. She was saying, or yesterday. She was like, who's Lola Montez? She goes, you're not going to gossip, are you? Like, this is not another thing. You're not going to become like TMZ, only like, I don't know, like a pseudo-intellectual TMZ sort of thing. And we could. Tomorrow we'll talk about what the kind of pants Louis XIV was wearing. And yes, and what kind of statement that's. But, yeah, Lola's dead. So, I did gossip a little bit about modern personalities, though. Yeah. But anyway, though, so that'll be it for today. I will catch you guys later.